Chris Aldrich, and my personal website is at www.bafosacco.com. Today I'm going to do a walkthrough of building and creating an IndieWeb website using the CMS WordPress. So I've got a copy of WordPress downloaded from wordpress.org, and I've just set it up on a server and included the database name and all the details to get it set up and started. A few minutes ago I had this error 403 page on the site, and after their famous 5-minute setup, I have this page at www.indiewebpress.com, and we're ready to set it up and install. So what we're going to start with today are a few prerequisites, and we're going to expect you to have. First is that you own a domain of your own choosing, and then we're going to expect that you have WordPress, the self-hosted .org version of WordPress, set up and running on a server. You can find a variety of hosts, including hosts that have one-click setup and installs. That will allow you to do this, so that will kind of cut down on the number of steps, or you can search out on the open web and find a huge number of tutorials about how to set up and get WordPress up and running quickly and easily on a server of your choosing. The benefit of this is that by owning the domain name and the setup and the service, you'll also own all of your URLs. That way, if you decide to either change content management systems, change service providers, typically you should be able to pick up and take all of your data with you, as well as your domain, pointed at a different server or different setup, and move all of your URLs and all of your content over to go from there. So I'm going to start here by running the infamous WordPress installation. We're going to give our site a title. I'll call this IndieWeb Press. We're going to create a username. I guess for now I can use my name. I'll create a password that we won't share with the world. Some kind of. I'll use my own email address. We'll let search engines index the site, that's fine, and then we'll click install. It'll sit and think a minute, and then we'll have a site ready to go. And look at that, that was literally that quick after putting in a few bits of detail. Let's see if it remembers me or if it's using an old password. Should log us right in, hopefully. So here we go. We've got a new dashboard. I'm going to dismiss this Welcome to WordPress business. And here's our basic dashboard setup. So what we're going to do here is we're going to install a handful of themes and plugins and connect one or two services that are going to take our own website. And right now we can post to almost anything, either via raw HTML or even basic text onto our site, and have a variety of really great pages and or posts that we can share out to the world freely and easily. And this is one of the fun benefits of WordPress is there's an awful lot of functionality built in and under the hood just in a raw WordPress install. I'm going to presume that most folks who are able to manage a Twitter account, an Instagram account, or a Facebook account can probably manage to get around on the admin interface of a WordPress installation to create posts and status updates and pages and those types of things. If you need help, there's a huge variety of places you can go. But what I'm going to do here today is try and focus primarily on some themes and IndieWeb specific plugins that are going to supercharge our setup on this WordPress install that allow a bunch of features and functionalities that WordPress doesn't have out of the box. And these features and functionalities, to a great extent, are going to allow us to mimic or recreate post types and interactions one typically has on a variety of social media websites, but do it in such a way so that you own all of these interactions on your own website. And instead of using something like Facebook or Twitter to interact with the world, you can begin using your own website to interact with the world in much the same way. So the first thing we're going to do is install some IndieWeb friendly themes. So let's go over to our Appearance tab. We'll click on Themes. There's a few that come out of the box in the standard WordPress install, the 2015, 2016, and 2017 themes. These actually don't do too bad a job for being used for IndieWeb purposes, but they're not necessarily as IndieWeb friendly as we would like them to be. So what happens in part of the functionality that's enabled by the broader IndieWeb community is a lot of the functionality is built on semantic HTML. WordPress is going to take care of doing most of the HTML and presentation of your website and pages, but it relies primarily, or at least its core setup relies primarily on microformats version 1, which goes back over a decade. And the current standard is microformats version 2, which is much more modern and slightly different. And there are some back compatibility pieces and tools that will allow you to kind of leverage and get a lot more out of WordPress. But because it's relying primarily on version 1, and we'd much rather be in a more modern version 2, we're going to choose themes that are a little more microformats 2 compliant, and that's going to get us a lot farther, and a lot faster in terms of how our site is going to be able to interact with the rest of the world. One can go to the IndieWeb wiki and look up the word microformats and find a greater wealth of information in a number of different languages even. And I also recommend the microformats.org website, which will provide even more information on what those are. But that technical piece aside, we can, if we use an IndieWeb friendly theme, we can not have to really worry so much about the microformats or problems they may or may not cause. So we'll skip over that bit and maybe come back in a later tutorial and touch base with more of those specifics. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add New to find a new theme. The WordPress repository has thousands and thousands of both free and paid themes one can download and set up, but we're going to look for one of a couple. The first one we'll look at that's probably most Microformats 2 compatible is a thing called SemPress that is designed and built by Matthias Pfefferly. We're going to find it, click install, and we're going to activate it. But we're also going to give you another option, another very friendly theme is called Independent Publisher, built by RomDev. We're going to install that so that we've got it as an option. We're not going to activate it. But what we can do is go back to our main themes page, and we'll see both the SemPress theme, which we've activated and set up, and we also have the option of independent publisher. So if your preference is to use the independent publisher theme, you can go ahead and activate that. Most of what follows from here should be roughly the same or similar, regardless of the theme you're using. The difference is the look and feel of the site you're building will be slightly different, but both of these will be very generally very IndieWeb friendly and allow you to do a huge number of things. So I'm going to, for the moment, go with the SemPress theme, and we'll continue kind of building out from here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to find some plugins. I'm going to go to the plugins on the sidebar and click Add New. For me, typically the quickest way to add most of the IndieWeb functionality and plugins, of which there are generally 5 to 10 on most sites that are using some of these technologies. I'm going to do it the most quickly. I'm going to use the IndieWeb plugin, which in some sense is a meta plugin to install a bigger suite. So when you search for IndieWeb, you'll find, you know, a couple dozen various plugins. But the quickest and easiest way is to install the IndieWeb plugin. We'll click Install Now, and it'll take a second or two. Suddenly it's installed, and then we can activate that. And that's going to take us here to our plugins page where it shows that it's installed now and it's activated. We'll also notice off here to the side, it's added a new tab to our menu. So we'll go look at the Getting Started page for a moment. There's some details and information here about what's going on and how to set things up, as well as pointers to the indieweb.org wiki. In fact, for those who are out there, if you'd like some documentation or details to follow along here, I'll also point out there is a WordPress page on the IndieWeb wiki, which has some very good basics here, but it also has a very specific Getting Started page on WordPress, chunks of which I'm going to cover here to a great extent. But I think if you're following along here with this tutorial, a lot of the stuff that's covered on some of these pages will be presented here, and you can hopefully follow along directly. But if you want to pause the video and consult with the wiki at any point, you can certainly go down that rabbit hole and play along with lots of other options. Naturally, there are thousands of ways to set your particular site up so that you can kind of get it to do what you want and kind of bend it to your will. The method I'm using here in this tutorial hopefully is one of the simpler and more direct methods that I've tried to set up to get you further, faster. But obviously you can keep playing with your website and add to it, subtract from it, tweak it, and do almost anything you'd like to do with it at the end of the day. But hopefully this will get you set up and started relatively quickly. So what we'll do here is we'll go back to our page. We've got this IndieWeb plugin installed, and Now we're going to add a handful of other plugins that are going to add some additional features and functionality. So I'm going to click on these others. And this particular page is going to show us, right now currently there are 9 additional plugins that are broadly recommended by the IndieWeb WordPress community. And we're going to install and activate a bunch of these. And what I'm going to do is do a quick install and activation of them right now. And then later on, we will go through a bunch of them one at a time and do what little configuration is necessary. And we'll show you some of the functionalities that each of these provide. But to speed things along, I'm going to quickly install and activate a bunch of these right now. So we're going to do the web mention plugin, the semantic links linkbacks plugin, which is related to the web mention plugin. We're going to install the micropub plugin, the postkinds plugin. We're going to add syndication links. We're going to add Bridgie for WordPress. We're going to add IndieAuth. We're not going to add microformats 2. This plugin is meant a little more for non-microformats 2 compliant plugins like the 2017, 2016, 2015 we saw earlier, as well as thousands of others. This plugin does its best to kind of wedge in modern microformats 2 setups into themes. But since we're using one of the 2 themes I mentioned earlier, we're not going to need this. And in fact, using it might actually cause some conflicts and issues. So I'm going to skip that on this. But if you wanted to use, one of the older non-compliant microformats 1 themes that are more common in the WordPress repository, you might want to try plugging this in and seeing if that fixes some of your problems. And let's also go ahead and install the simple location plugin, which adds some fun location-related features and functionalities we might not get to in this instance. And it's not necessarily an IndieWeb plugin, but dovetails well with some other IndieWeb related pieces. So I'm going to go through and quickly activate all these plugins. And then we will then proceed to go through and configure some of them. So the first one we'll talk about is the web mention plugin and the related semantic linkbacks plugin. These 2 act in concert. And essentially what they enable is the ability to do what's commonly known as @mentions, but they enable @mentions on a broader scale on the internet. So while you're using a platform like Twitter, Twitter has @mentions, and those @mentions only work within Twitter. You can't use an @mention in Twitter to mention someone on Facebook. You can't use it to mention someone on Medium. You can't use it to mention them on Instagram. And similarly for things like Facebook, you can @mention your friends in your posts on Facebook, but those @mentions don't work across the boundary of Facebook to the rest of the web. And what web mention does is allows you to, in some sense, send notifications back and forth that you've mentioned someone on another website, and it allows you to receive mentions back yourself in a simple way. And how it does that is it actually uses the permalink URL of the particular post you're making to do that. The fun part here is that by installing and activating both web mention and semantic linkbacks, our WordPress site is now able to both send and receive web mentions, and it doesn't require any additional configuration or setup. And this, to me, is a really amazing thing. So I'll mention very briefly, and it gets a little more technical, but semantic linkbacks as a plugin essentially is supplementing the web mention plugin, and it's adding a bunch of micro formats and layout and look and feel things so that when you do receive web mentions on your site, they look a little prettier and they look a little more like standard comments would on most social silos. So if you're used to using something like Facebook, semantic linkbacks will make the comments you write on your own website on WordPress look and appear a little better in terms of when you receive web mentions. So the web mentions you receive may look a little wonky or off if you're not using this plugin. I don't know many, if any, people who are using the web mention plugin without semantic linkbacks. I've seen a few on the open web. It's typically very rare, and the look and feel of how those web mentions appear can, be drastically odd. And maybe off in the future sometime, the code bases of both web mention and semantic linkbacks will merge together, and it'll be a smaller, simpler plugin. But for now, they're being developed in parallel. But the nice part is once they're installed and activated, you don't need to do anything else. The functionality just follows. So we don't need to do anything else there to configure those. Similarly for MicroPub, we can get a quick overview of MicroPub. This also doesn't really require any additional configuration or activation beyond activation. But for those of you who remember the early days of Twitter, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of Twitter clients that allowed you to authenticate to your Twitter account, and then you were able then to use those applications more often than not to post your content, your photos directly to Twitter on your behalf. So MicroPub is very similar to those old Twitter applications. The difference is the MicroPub spec, which is a W3C recommendation, is a broad open spec that will allow MicroPub applications to be built to then publish to a variety of websites. So if you had some other content management system, let's say like Drupal or WithKnown or Perch or any one of hundreds of others, if your instance has a MicroPub endpoint on it, any MicroPub client can be used to publish content to your site. So the nice part is this MicroPub plugin allows an endpoint on your WordPress site that'll allow you to use a huge number of growing number of MicroPub clients, so that you can more easily publish content to your website in simple and easy manners. Hopefully we'll be able to get to examples of that later on. PostKinds is a plugin that will require a tiny amount of configuration. So let's go take a look at that, and we'll set that up. So I'm going to go to a new tab here, and we'll notice that since we've activated and installed a bunch of these things, we have some more options down here. I'm going to go to the PostKinds tab, and it's going to give us a setup with a few simple defaults for posting content to our site. So you'll notice here that we've got a large number of post types or post kinds that we can now set up on our WordPress site. And what post kinds does is it creates a customized layout and display for specific types of content you'd like to post to your WordPress site. I have documented and written about this on my own website in the past. So you can go to this URL and read a quick synopsis of what this does. But going back to the original, it's got the types of article, bookmark, reply enabled automatically. Let's say if we wanted our site to support check-ins, so that we could add Foursquare-like or Swarm-like check-in functionality. If we were going to post audio to our site regularly, we could do that. If we were going to dovetail our site with sites like GitHub, and we wanted to create issues and post those to our site, we could do that. Let's add like. We might like to post some photos to our website. Maybe things that we've read we'd like to post to our website. We can add that. Typically here I would say do the minimum number you think you can get away with, and then as you want to begin posting more and more content to your site or types of content, you can add as many or all of these, or even if you want to dig into some code a little bit, you can very easily add additional types that aren't on this list. There's a handful in the code that are supported that you might have to dig into the code to enable a little bit, but this plugin is incredibly flexible and will add quite, it'll by itself out of the box get you very far, but even under the hood, it'll get you even farther if you care to play around there. But I'm going to start with this handful of post types, and we'll do a few examples as we go along. As a default kind for new posts, you can choose any of the ones you've enabled. I'm going to go with Note, which is also parlance for status update, or short update, the type you would post typically to Twitter as the default. I think a lot of people are probably more likely to post short status updates to their site more often than articles or other types, but choose the one that you think you're going to use most often and use that as the default. We can embed sites into our responses, and essentially this setting here will allow you to do things. Let's say you wanted to post a video from YouTube. You can put in a simple URL, and post kinds will kind of automatically scrape and use an O-embed process to embed the YouTube video directly into your website a little more easily. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it, so for the moment I'm going to uncheck that box and we'll go from there. The last option here is the display before kind option. So what's going to happen is, let's say for a read post, we read an article from the New York Times online, and what we're going to do is create a read post on our website to indicate we've just read this article from the New York Times. So at the top of that, there's going to be a little piece of UI that's going to indicate what type of post we've made on our website, and that can be either an icon, some text, icon and text, or we can just display nothing and hope the user who's reading our site can intuit what that post type was. I'm going to be the most explicit. I'm going to choose the option to show an icon and the text and go from there. So I'm going to click save these changes. And now for the most part, we have fully configured all the settings we need for post kind. So let's do a quick example. And since we use the New York Times, as an example, let's find an article on the New York Times today, and we'll make a read post as the first to our website. So let's take this Korean leaders meet article. I'm going to take the raw URL for this particular article. I'm going to go to our site. I'm going to click on add a new post. and we'll see our UI interface here for the first time. So there's a box here for location. I'm going to close that up. There's one for syndication links. I'm going to ignore that for a moment. I'm going to go up here to screen options in the top right-hand corner and make sure we've got all of the metadata displayed that we'd like to add. You can select or deselect these as you feel appropriate. But what we're going to do is we're going to go, there's this format box. So there's a post formats that's a core functionality built into WordPress that's, I don't think it's really actively being developed. And the post kinds plugin is in some sense going to override this post format on our behalf. So when we post a read post, it really is going to go back and default to link, which I can set manually if I want. But I'm going to close this box because we're really not going to use that. I'm going to go to the kinds box. In fact, I'm going to move it up the page a little bit so it's a little easier to set and find. I'm going to set this as a read post, and when I do that, you'll notice this response properties box opens up for us and gives us a new field to play around with for our read post. So I'm going to put the URL of that New York Times article, presuming we've just read it. Post kinds is going to automatically parse that page and retrieve the metadata from the New York Times website relating to that page on our behalf. So this happens automatically. I'm going to click OK, and let's look at the data it's just imported for us. So if we click on author, we'll see that it's sucked in the data for the author of the site, or of the author of this article, and a URL for the author there as well. So if we go back to the New York Times site and we skim down a little bit, we'll notice here that here's the name, and if we hover over this, we'll find the same URL for that author that we've pulled in. So literally with just the URL, we have sucked in both the author and the author's URL. And if we click on details, we'll find that a bunch of other details have been sucked in. So we've got a quick summary of what the article was about. We've got the name of the site that was pulled in. And depending on how you'd like to display your data, all of this stuff is now modifiable after it's been, it's parsed the page and pulled it in. So if I prefer to write this out as New York Times to maybe make things a little prettier, we can do that. It's pulled in the data about the published date and time of the article, as well as the most recent time the article was updated. That's great. It's got a bunch of tags that the New York Times put in their metadata. It's also got a featured image. We can take a look at what this featured image is, but it should be the same featured image that was on the page itself. So you'll notice here, the New York Times has this nice big photo at the top of their post. Well, Post Kinds plugin has parsed that page and found that same photo through the meta tags on the New York Times site and pulled that photo in for us as well. So we've got all of the primary metadata relating to that setup. In fact, actually, let's go a step further. There's a bunch of different ways we can do this, but let's save this image from the New York Times just to show you a little bit of the power of WordPress. There's other quicker ways to automate this. Let's take that and make that our featured image. I think eventually Post Kinds will actually build this functionality in, where we're going to upload that photo we saw, and we're going to set that as our featured image. And then let's make a comment. So here's the main body of our WordPress post. We can make any kind of comments we want about things we thought of when we read the article. I'm going to do something throwaway. This is and some purple. I really appreciate their coverage and analysis. The simple enough thing. So let's go back up here to our publish post. We can choose whether our post is public, password protected, private. I'm going to leave it public. We can set a date and time for this. Typically, I've set it as the date and time that I read the article, which is roughly right now, so I'm not going to change that. We can set the time zone. There's a setting here we'll get to in a little bit that will allow us to do this. I'm in Los Angeles, so let's choose Los Angeles. There's a location from the location plugin. We can get to that detail later. We've set it that it's going to be a read post. Let's categorize this as, well, you could choose your own. We won't set anything. Tag, it's an article about Korea. So we'll do that. And add your own tags and categories as you choose. We're not going to do this yet because we haven't set that up. So I'm going to leave that empty. Most of all these other metadata fields we can ignore at the moment. I'm going to put the discussion stuff in a field over here and hide that. The slug is going to be the URL of the post. Let's make the slug the name of the article we're posting. I'm the author of the post. That's fine. Syndication links, we'll get to this in a little bit. But let's take a look at what now the PostKinds plugin is going to do and how it's going to display. So I'm going to click the preview button and we'll take a quick look at what the PostKinds plugin is doing. So here's what our site looks like. This is our technically, I guess, second post because there's a Hello World post in here. Our theme is indicating to us here that this is a link. It's the setting that we had earlier on. Look at this. We can match up what's going on with the settings we put in. Oop. Name is very similar to IndieWeb.org. An autofill takes over. So here's the settings we were looking at. We were looking at the PostKinds plugin settings. So here is the display before kind. We had the show icon, show text, show icon and text, or display nothing. So in our sample post here, we get this book icon with the word read. So the icon, if we chose icon only, it would just show the book. If we showed text only, it would show the word read, or read in this case, meaning we read this article about North and South Korea set bold goals. Or we could show nothing, in which case then we would just have the name of the article and the title. So PostKinds is creating most of this post for us. It's quickly sucked in all the metadata about the title of the article we read. It's automatically doing a quick link so that if I open this in a new tab, it takes us to that New York Times article. How fancy is that? It tells us who the author is. It tells us the outlet that wrote it. As you'll recall, we earlier changed this from New York Times or nytimes.com, and we wrote it out in full, changed it to New York Times. And then this is the quick summary and quote is the one that appears here, is what we're seeing here. And then there's a separator, and below that is the comment that we wrote. And then below this, the theme is adding in the date and time, the category, the tags, and the ability to leave comments and whatnot. So we've now been able to read an article on another website and literally with just the URL, put it into our site and very quickly create a post. And obviously, once you've done this once or twice, it goes even quicker. We've been able to create a post to indicate we've read this article somewhere on the web and we're posting it as a read post to our own website with a quick little comment. And then finally, just to match the last thing up, the featured image we've created here and downloading and putting the post up, we'll see is the featured image that appears at the top of the post. So here we have an incredibly data-rich post about something we've read, and 3 weeks from now we can come back to our website, search for it, find it, and quickly see when and where we read it, find out a bunch of metadata relating to it, and we're good and on our way. And now anybody who's following our website or following even just our read posts will have an idea of what we're reading on a minute by minute, day by day, or week by week basis. So this is a quick, easy way for doing this. So now I'm going to, let's actually publish this as a sample post. Now that we previewed it and we like what it is and says and does. And then we've got a quick little run through of what the post kinds plugin does and how that works. We'll come to a few more examples here in a little bit, but let's go back now to our setting up of the rest of our plugins. So we've now enabled let's look at our setup here. So we looked at the getting started page earlier. The extensions are the list of plugins that we have activated and installed, or most of. Remember we left the microformats 2 off. Let's go to the options setup here. Typically, if you're setting this up for yourself as a single user, you'll want to indicate that your site is a single author site. If you're setting your site up to be shared by multiple authors, you can disable this. You can actually only disable it if you've created additional users. Otherwise, the plugin knows that there's only one author for the site and that default is the only one that's there. So if you have multiple authors, you can uncheck this box and then choose the correct default author. There's a setting for use the user website URL for the author. And in my case, if this is my own personal website, and I'm going to identify myself as IndieWebPress.com, then I would check this box, and IndieWebPress.com becomes my kind of default author URL, rather than WordPress has a separate URL for each individual author on the site. So if you have a multi-author site, that permalink URL for each individual author will then become the default author URL. And then there are some icons associated with the IndieWebPress or the IndieWeb plugin, and you've got the option to go with black and white icons or color icons. In this case, I'm going to leave and go with the default. So if you change any of these settings, do a quick little button click, save those settings. The location settings for the simple location plugin are relatively straightforward. It gives you a few options, and particularly you would want to use this if you're going to indicate where you're making posts from. So if you want to indicate where you were when you made specific posts, you'll want to set these configuration options up. You have a few map providers. Google Maps probably is one of the more common. There's also Bing Maps and OpenStreetMap. Typically with choosing these, you will have to also register with the map provider to get the correct API keys so that maps actually show up on your site. I'm not going to go into depth on this here, but since we installed it and activated, I thought I'd go through it. But you get to show your location by default or not. I'm going to choose not to. There's a widget you can use to show where you were and some other details. I'm going to disable that. You can choose map width and height and default zooms. I'm not going to set the rest of this up, but certainly you could and kind of delve into that. It's a slightly more involved, but obviously the number of settings here is pretty minimal. But I'm not going to go through setting up the API keys here, and I'll leave that as an exercise for the user. We've already done, as I mentioned, the settings for the post kind setup. So let's delve into next setting up the Syndication Links plugin. So we're going to click on this link to see the options. Now, what syndication links are meant for is when you're as you enter this new realm of IndieWeb, ideally you'll be making posts on your own website first. And if you then want to, you can optionally syndicate your content out to other websites like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google+, and any one of the thousands of others. But what happens is over time, you may forget what sites you syndicated your content to, where that content is, where it exists, how it's set up. And you may want to be able to provide on your site an indicator of where you syndicated your content. So as an example, well, I guess let's go first through these options quickly. There's some icons that will display or not display, and we'll get to that when we do an example here shortly. So I'm going to let's do icons and text is the highest setting. And that'll give everybody an idea of what that is. I'm going to choose medium icons, but you can go small, medium, and large. If you want to do black icons, you can do that. I'm going to opt for the full color icons that are built into the plugin. If you want to add syndication links on your front page, your archive pages, and in search results, you can. I'm going to choose not to do that. You can choose to show these icons within your feed. That's an option. I'll leave it on. And then there's a setting that you can set the text that appears before your links. The default here is also on. I prefer to do syndicated to is my preferred. I think it's a little more obvious what this is, and I'll change it mostly so that we can see what happens. I'm going to save these changes. And then let's go to that sample read post that we had before. Let's take this post. We'll look at it as it appears on our website here. And let's say we wanted to share the fact that we've read this post. Let's share it to our Twitter account. So here we've got a brand new Twitter account that's literally got nothing on it. I'm going to put the URL into our Twitter account. I'm going to let's cut and paste this fact that we've read this article. I don't know. What should we do? Let's do an emoji here. Find a book emoji that we can throw up. Let's use this. Use that as a visual indicator on our Twitter account to indicate that we read this article. North and South Korea set bold goals, and we're going to create a link to our site, and we're going to share this. We'll tweet it out, and there's our first tweet. So now on Twitter, we have a post that in some sense looks like a read post that says, we have read this article, and here's the permalink as it appears on our webpage. Now, what we'd like to do is we'd like to indicate on our own website that we've syndicated this post to Twitter. So I'm going to hover over this Now button, and I'm going to right-click and copy the link address for this tweet. I'm going to come back to the user interface on WordPress and show within the, within the syndication links setup, I'm going to put that permalink URL, add it here. If I wanted to add additional, let's say I also sent a copy to Facebook and Instagram, I would add additional pieces here. So I'm going to add the permalink on Twitter as it exists into the syndication links. And right now I'm doing this manually. In a little bit, we'll show you a quick way of doing this in a non-manual way, so it's all automated. But right now I'm going to do it manually just to show what it looks like and how it could be done. I'm going to click the update button on this post. We've redone it. I'm going to click view post. We'll now go to our post, the same one we had before. The difference here now is we have at the bottom of our post an indicator that we've syndicated it to Twitter. So here is both the icon and the word or the text. If you wanted to get rid of the text and just show the icon, you could do that by going back to the syndication links setup and choosing either icon, text, or in our case, we've done icons and text. So that's how that piece works. But if we compare it to the post we had a moment ago on the other tab, you'll notice we don't have an indicator of where we syndicated the thing to. So 6 months from now, a year from now, we may come back to our original post and know that we've syndicated it out somewhere else, but not remember. But syndication links in some part allows us some institutional memory of what sites and where we've syndicated our content to. In a little bit, we'll cover a few additional pieces that extend this idea even further, but for now, I'm going to leave this here just to show a simple example of what Syndication Links is doing and how to use it. So let's go back to our setup. We've done post kinds. So that's most of the setup. We'll get to Bridgie in just a minute, but what I want to do so that we can kind of better own and indicate whose content is what, when, and where, I'm going to set up one or two quick little side things that are enabled with our IndieWeb plugins here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Users, and I'm going to go to my particular profile. And we're going to set up some metadata here to indicate kind of who we are on the web. So I'm going to go to our profile settings. There's a bunch here that you can pick and choose based on your own preferences. Because I'm going to use this website, and I've got my own personal website set up, but I'm going to pretend for our purposes that I'm setting this up the same way anyone else would as their own personal website. So I'm going to set this up as myself. I'm going to put in my first name, my last name in this field, my nickname. Let's keep that default. Let's display our name publicly. I prefer to do it as my name as it naturally would appear in the world. Let's do some contact info. So we've got my email is in here because I set it up when I installed WordPress originally. For my website, this is going to be, I'm going to pretend for the moment, this is going to be my primary presence on the web. So WordPress.com, which is the same URL as the site I'm on up here. So whatever your domain name is, that's the domain you should be using. Oh, let's have that right. Setup. I'm not going to associate my account at the moment with a GitHub account, but whatever your GitHub username is, you can put that in here. Your Google Plus, your Twitter username. So for all intents and purposes, let's say that this Twitter account here is the account that I'm going to be associating with my primary account. So I'm going to do that. Let's go back here in our, that's going to be my Twitter username and Twitter handle. If you have a Facebook ID, you can do that. I'm not going to set that up. I'm just going to, for today's purposes, set up Twitter. And a lot of these accounts and what we're about to do follow more or less the same pattern. So I think in doing just Twitter, hopefully everything else will follow for all these other sites and services. There's a micro.blog username if you're using microblog. This I know was just added to this plugin a day or two ago. Instagram, Flickr, you can put in a telephone if you'd like. Just for giggles, let's add the traditional default telephone, and a PGP, biographical information, the web. I will say citizen of the internet. Choose and put what you'd like. Profile picture. This is populated based on a Gravatar account, which I've previously set up. If you click on this, it'll take you to the Gravatar site. And what happens is you will put in some data, you'll use an email address and upload your own photo. And what Gravatar does in conjunction with WordPress is it uses your email address as the key. And unless you make it public, your email address will be hidden both on your WordPress site as well as on your Gravatar account. So you're not putting it out in the open if you're worried about privacy. But on the back side, Gravatar, which is a company that falls under the umbrella of the Automatic company, which also operates and builds WordPress.com, which is related to the core WordPress.org product that we're using here. They're corporately related, so they're kind of using your email address as a key in the background to pull in and create a profile photo. So that's where that's coming from. So if you haven't set it, pause this for a moment, go to Gravatar, set up an account, put in your email address, whatever other detail you want to fill in there, and upload a photo. And then when you save it and come back here and refresh this page, you should have a profile picture automatically. We've already set a password. Let's fill in a street address, 123 Happy Street, apartment 5. Let's say we're in Los Angeles. Let's see, our own data here, California 9048. Good middle of Hollywoody, middle of Los Angeles zip code, country name. Let's do USA. You can fill in as much or as little of this data as you'd like, but some of it's going to be displayed in a few minutes as we're adding this data to create an H card. We'll say our job title is manager. With IndieWeb. This last block here is for other sites that represent you on the web or other profiles. So up here we had GitHub, Twitter, Google+, Facebook, Flickr. We were able to add very specific references to our other accounts on the internet. And we'll see where these play out in a few minutes. But let's say, let's say we've got another website that's really important to us. That's not one of these 5 or 6 kind of big name setups. Let's say we've got a profile. In fact, let's use my profile from IndieWeb.org. So we'll search for my name. Find. So here's my user page on the IndieWeb wiki. There wasn't a profile page in the settings for this, but it represents me to some extent on the web. So I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to go back to this profile setting. I'm going to put it in this other site because my profile on the IndieWeb wiki represents me somewhere else on the web. So I'm going to put that in here. And we'll kind of see what this does here in a little bit. But we're going to add a rel me attribute that indicates the site is also me somewhere else on the web. It doesn't say here, but I believe these are if you have 5 or 6 other sites. And I personally probably have almost 200 or more versions of identity on the web. So I have not only a Twitter and a Instagram and a Facebook account, but I've got a Stack Exchange account. I've got an Instagram account. I could add all of those other 200 some odd accounts, 1 per line in this other sites category. But I'm going to leave it right now for just this one. There's the simple location plugins that adds a last reported location. So I can click this button and it's not going to work for me because this is in an HTTPS site. So I'm going to leave that for right now, but I can update my current location and that plugin will use my browser to intuit where I'm at in terms of latitude and longitude. I'm going to ignore that, but I'm going to save all this other data we put in here and click Update Profile. So now we've saved that. I'm going to go to Appearance and then Widgets. And what we're going to do is we're going to add we're going to update the widgets that appear in the sidebars of our website. I'm not a big fan of the default metadata widget on WordPress, which essentially is this piece right here. Whoop. I don't know how that happened, but I'm not a big fan of that widget, so I'm going to delete it. Categories and archives are fun to have. Search is always a fun widget. So these are the widgets that essentially appear on the sidebar over here. But what we want to do is add we want to add an author hcard widget to our page. I'm going to add it up here towards the top, and I'm going to use an avatar size, let's say 250. Log out of our site. So let's see if we can try this again. We'll log back in. Hopefully you won't do that. I'll add the widget back over in the bar. I'm going to reset it to 250. We'll click save. Then let's go back to our main site. And what we've now added is a little hcard widget that adds our photo, our name, our address, and our bio as the default. So a bunch of that data we entered on our profile page for our user account is now being displayed here. And if we inspect it using our browser tools, and I'm currently using Chrome, we'll see this section here is a little hcard widget that we've just added. So we've got a micro format, and I won't go into too heavy depth on what these micro formats are, but to a simple extent, they're small little pieces of metadata that we're wrapping around the data we've entered into our user account that allows both our site and other sites to parse our web page to find out who we are. So much the same way the PostKinds plugin parsed that New York Times article we had earlier to get the title of the article, the author, and the author's URL, and a synopsis of it. There are tools out there that can parse our page to find both our author name, in this case it's me right here, as Chris Aldrich. It's going to find our location, and it does this with this, where is the actual, so here it is, the actual micro format is hcard. And so essentially, to some extent, this is like a Rolodex card, but for internet use, if you want to think of it that way. So here's our hcard on the internet. It's got a URL, which is a micro format to indicate our URL on the web, which is IndieWebPress.com. It's got a P name, which is our first and last name here. I think if we extend this out, it also includes the Gravatar photo that we linked using our email address, and it has a UPhoto micro format to indicate this is a photo of us, and because it's embedded underneath here, it indicates who it's a photo of. In my case, it's a photo of me for representing this domain name with my name. So we could have on this page, if we wanted to, we could throw in 10 different hcards for various people. And because the way the data is nested, each card would represent bits and pieces of data in a properly nested fashion of the particular person, a photo of them, their name, their address, and whatever biography data we wanted to throw in. So if you want to modify your hcard, you can go back to that user page we were on a few minutes ago and remove bits and pieces. Or if you want, the IndieWeb.org wiki or the microformats.org wiki has a lot of detail about how to hand code and write your own hcard so that you can literally make it look exactly what you'd like to on your own site. But to be quick and dirty, we're going to use this hcard widget that's automatically built into the IndieWeb plugin that we had installed earlier. So here we've got the title of our website, the sad default tagline that WordPress involves. We've got a post. We've now got an H card that, in some sense, when you come to your primary domain, says, this is who I am. Here's a picture of me. And guess what? It's not drastically different than when you go to any other social media page for yourself on the web. It shows a photo, your name, details about you. In fact, actually, we didn't even set that stuff up on our Twitter account yet. We've done more to indicate who we are on our own personal website here than we have even on Twitter at this point. So now we've got an H card. Let's set up what is known in IndieWeb parlance as some rel.me links. We'll get to in a minute what rel.me is and what it does. But there's some basic definition on the IndieWeb.org page about what rel.me is as a microformat. And essentially what it is, in fact, actually, Twitter does this. So let's look at how Twitter does rel.me. So let's go in and go to our profile page on Twitter, and let's edit it and add a few pieces of data. So we've got a header photo in here already, a profile photo. We've got a tagline. We don't have a location. Who cares? What we do want to do is put our personal domain that identifies our website online, and let's put it in this file. So in our case, I'm going to use the website we've just set up, http the web.com, and I'm going to save that. So let's hover over this new type. So here's our home on the web is our own domain at IndieWebPress.com, or your domain, example.com, whatever that happens to be. We're going to have this match the same thing on your related Twitter account. So let's look at and inspect this element of this Twitter page over here to the side, and we'll see that it's got an href. It's wrapped. Twitter wraps all of their URLs in a t.co domain. But if you click on it, in fact, I will click on it. We'll open it in a new tab. So it opens this new tab, and what it does is it redirects to our own website. So you'll notice that this IndieWebPress.com over here is got an anchor tag, A, and then it's got an href with a link that goes to our website. But in Twitter's case, it's wrapped it in their own short domain name. And it's got a title and a few other attributes, but the most important one for our situation right now is that it's got a rel equals me. And what rel.me is doing here, it's indicating that the domain in the href that's indicated here, which is our personal website or whatever yours is, example.com, but that the IndieWeb or the IndieWebPress.com domain that I'm using to identify me on the web is me. So when I go to Twitter, Twitter is adding this rel equals me to indicate that the user account that is indicated by this Twitter page with twitter.com/IndieWP is the same as my own domain on another site. So Twitter is taking my website and pointing it across to this other account, and pointing and saying, this is also me on the web. So what I want to do is have a reciprocal rel me from my own website pointing back at this Twitter page. So the question is, how do we do that? There's probably about 10 different methods and means, but the quickest and easiest one is to use this little rel me widget. Yeah, I thought we deleted that. So we're going to display rel equals me links. I'm going to put it, let's put it right under our hcard widget. There's no settings here. In fact, just to show how it changes, let's go back to 125 pixels per avatar and save this. And let's see what changes happen on our site. So our avatar's gotten a little smaller. That probably scale-wise looks a little better. But we've now added some rel me data with this little widget. So this rel equals me widget is adding this Twitter icon and this, in fact, it's adding the IndieWeb.org site that I had. So let's go back and see how this relates to the user data that we added before. So let's go to users and then my profile. And let's say I did have a GitHub name. Let's say it's Chris Aldrich. My Facebook ID is number. My microblog username. Go down and save these. We'll update our profile. And then we can see that the rel me links we've added with this widget when we refresh the page. So now I've added a few more accounts. So now I'm getting icons for these other accounts. One for GitHub, one for Twitter. If I actually open the Twitter one up in a new page, it'll show me this IndieWebpress Twitter account that we've set up. If I do it for Facebook, we can see who it is that opens, who owns that weird number. So it opens that page with that number. Nobody has that account, so it doesn't actually find a page because I made it up. But if I use the microblog one, it should actually open up my microblog feed, which it does. How nice is that? But what we've done here now is this little rel me widget. If we look at and inspect the element, we'll notice that this Twitter icon has a uses an SVG image, which is nice and lovely. Well, let's see. It should be adding a rel me element here. But where is it hiding it? So here it is. So it's got, here's the anchor, the href, and here's the address for my Twitter account. In twitter.com/IndieWP is the Twitter account that I'm saying matches up with my IndieWebpress.com account. So these two essentially are gonna, one identifies me as my website, one is my Twitter account. And you'll notice that on this anchor tag that there is a rel equals me link here. So now I have my own domain on my homepage of my own domain. I've got a link that says this Twitter account that I'm linking to is another version of me on the internet. And reciprocally, my Twitter account has a web address that is indicating me and another place on the internet. So my Twitter account points at my home domain or my homepage, and my homepage points at my Twitter account. And the only way that one can have both of these two rel me's pointing at each other is to actually own both accounts. So Twitter has done the coding part on its own behalf so that when I put in my homepage into my Twitter account, it adds that rel me for me and points back at my homepage. And because I own my own WordPress site, in this case, IndieWebPress.com, and this rel me widget is putting, where did we, had too many tabs open. But this widget that we found in the appearance section is adding this rel me data with these links that it's finding in my user account. So now my site points at Twitter, and my Twitter account points back at my site. And we're going to see in just a minute some additional power that this allows us to do. And to show you that power, let's go configure the next thing on our list. Let's go to where is it going to be hiding? Let's go to settings in general. So what we can do, let's go change our tagline. Well, we'll leave our tagline alone, I guess, at the moment. Let's set our time zone. Los Angeles. If you haven't set your time zone or other settings, go ahead and scroll down and do that. Set your date and time formats to ones you think are appropriate. So earlier we had installed and activated the IndieAuth plugin, and this is where the IndieAuth settings are. So let's, for the moment, let's not use a local endpoint, but for ease of use, let's choose indieauth.com. We're going to delegate an authorization endpoint on our website to use indieauth.com. And let's save this setting. And we'll show you why in just a second. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use this IndieAuth setup to set up a Bridgie account. So what we'd like to be able to do is create posts on our own website and easily syndicate them to Twitter. And to do that, we're going, in our case, we did it manually earlier, but we'd like to automate that. So here's a simple, easy way to do that. We're going to use a service called Bridgie, brid.gy. You can find it on the IndieWeb wiki by typing it in, and it'll give you a quick synopsis and some details about how to use it. So let's configure that here in the IndieWeb sub tab for Bridgie. Let's enable publishing to Twitter. We can have it set to check it by default. If we want to automate things a little more, that's fine. So we're gonna, and if I remember correctly, it should, because we've got a Twitter account set up, it should show that we've put a Twitter account in there, so it's enabled, and while all the others are disabled, because it hasn't found any that link back. But we'll enable Twitter. We haven't set up any of these others, so we're not going to enable those at the moment. Link back to post. Let's say yes. Let's show a link back to our post. You can either hide it or link back if the link is a shortened link. I'll let you dig into the settings on the plugin and the description of the plugin in the repository to read how that stuff works. we'll kind of do the quick and dirty version. So we'll leave it as the default as show. Disable plain text white space. We'll leave that as it is. We won't send short links instead of a full URL. Set Twitter from post excerpt. We won't do that for now. We'll let you read up on that on yourself. We'll save those changes. Well, and then what we'll do is we'll register for our Twitter account to Bridgie. So we'll click on this. This is going to take us to an OAuth page on Twitter to authorize Bridgie to publish on our behalf. So we'll recognize the HTTPS twitter.com OAuth page, which I know and trust, and showing us the Bridgie logo here and details about who and what Bridgie is. And it'll tell us what this application is going to be authorized to do. It's going to be able to read tweets from our timeline, see who we follow, and follow new people. It's going to allow us to update our profile and post tweets on our behalf. Primarily what Bridgie is really going to do here with this plugin is post tweets on our behalf. So we're going to say, yes, authorize this app. It's going to then redirect us back to the application. So we should be registered for Bridgie now. And if we open this Twitter page, it'll take us to our Bridgie account. It's going to indicate our Twitter account that's linked to our, so here's our Twitter account and here's our web page account. And we want to enable listening on Twitter, so we'll click that. We'll authorize the app. It's going to send us back. Should send us back anyway. Okay, so now Bridgie is listening for responses on our behalf. It hasn't pulled yet. It's ready to publish. So the first authorization we gave it earlier was to allow it to publish on our behalf. And I've also just manually set it up to listen to responses on Twitter on our behalf as well. So now we're going to use Bridgie as a third-party site to publish on our behalf to Twitter, and it's also going to listen to our Twitter account for responses to posts. So anytime somebody likes one of our tweets, when they retweet a tweet, or they reply or comment on one of our tweets, Bridgie is going to be listening and looking for those responses, and it's going to send those responses back to our website on our behalf using the web mention protocol we talked about earlier on. And because we have activated and installed the web mention plugin, there's going to be an endpoint on our website that's going to receive those responses from Bridgie and post them to our website on our behalf. So let's take a look and see what this looks like. And we'll see if we can't do a round trip circuit for a new post. So let's create a new post on our website. Let's do a status update this time. So since we in post kinds set the default to be a note, we should be able to write a status update that we want to send to Twitter. Here's our first syndicated post from our own website to Twitter. That's our note. We don't need to create a title. If you want to, you can. So let's go down. We're going to publish it immediately as soon as we click this publish button. But let's look real quickly at some of the other metadata. It's going to post it as a note to our site. We don't need to categorize it, but let's say we wanted to create a category of microblog. Add a category, check it, and then let's say from here on out, we will all our status updates will choose the microblog category. And what that'll let people do is if they just want to subscribe to just our status updates, our microblog updates, they can do that quickly and easily separate from our photo posts or our article posts or whatever those other post types might be. Tags, this is Twitter, so let's add a Twitter tag. Here's our Bridgie Publish plugin is adding this field here, and we want to publish it to, if we added Facebook and others, we would have a number of options. So right now we're gonna publish this status update to Twitter, and the Bridgie Publish plugin is going to use the Bridgie service to do that on our behalf. For this link back to post, we want it to show, and what that's going to do is it's going to take the Syndication Links plugin we talked about earlier. It's going to post our note to Twitter. It's going to automatically find the permalink on Twitter that gets sent back from our post, and it's going to suck that back in, put it into Syndication Links on our behalf. And then our link on Twitter, our note on Twitter, is going to have a permalink of our own website show up on it as well. We're not going to use a featured image because it's just a short status update. We've only got one author, it's us. We can create a custom slug if we want. Otherwise, Facebook will create one for us. Discussion will allow comments and will allow trackbacks and pangbacks. Okay, that's fine. We don't need an excerpt. Custom fields, location. No, we don't need anything else. So we've filled in all the fields and all the metadata that I think we need. So hopefully we'll be able to now click publish, and our post will post directly to our website after it processes for a second. So let's view our new post on our website. So here it is. So the SEMpress theme is automatically creating a default title of number 7, which is fine. We can tweak that later if we wanted to in our theme settings. But that's what this number 7 is. It's something that's generated by WordPress and our theme and being displayed. But here's our short note is right here. And by the magic of the Bridgie service in combination with the Bridgie plugin we installed and activated earlier, we now have, and with the Syndication Links plugin, we now have this section right here that says our note was syndicated to Twitter. So let's look and see what that looks like. We'll hover over the Twitter link. We'll open it in a new window, and we should be able to go to our Twitter account. And dirty dog if it didn't mess up a little bit. So here is a small conflict between what the theme wants to have happen and what Bridgie is doing on our behalf. So here's a small glitch, and I think we can probably remedy it, but this will give us at least an indication of what's going on. So it's saying, here's number 7, and here's a link to the thing we posted. So here's our post on our website. It didn't take the content we wanted, which is this text right here. We wanted to send that to Twitter with a permalink. So we got part of what we wanted, and we got the permalink from our site sent to Twitter, but it didn't work out just perfect, but we're experimenting. So let's see if we can't fix this here. But we also have the permalink to Twitter is hiding on our page right here. And on Twitter, the permalink for our Twitter post is also pointing back to our site as well. So we've at least got part of the thing. Let's see if we can fix the slightly broken piece. Let's close a few of these tabs so we don't have 8 million of them open up. Let's go back. Let's create a new post on our site and see if we can't fix what was wrong. Let's first go to the bridgey settings. And let's say that we want to set Twitter from post excerpt. I think that's what we can do. Let's click that and then save the changes. Now let's create a new post. Our new status update is, let's try this just one more time. That's our status update. Copy that. We're going to put it in the excerpt part of our piece here. And this is the text that's going to get syndicated to Twitter on our behalf. So let's say we wrote a really long lorem ipsum bit. It was huge, long thing. Big long article. But we only want to post a snippet of that to Twitter. This is where we could take the excerpt, dump it in here, and that's what's going to get cross-posted to Twitter automatically by the Bridgey plugin. So for the time being, we'll delete this part. We'll set all the rest of our metadata. We're posting a note to our site. It's going to be in our microblog category. Twitter. On this just for fun. We're going to publish it to Twitter. We don't need the author. We don't need a slug. We'll allow comments. That's it. So we typed it in, chosen the post kind we're doing, said yes, send it to Twitter. Now let's click publish, and we'll see what happens. We're going to view our post. Let's try this just one more time. It's syndicated to Twitter automatically. Let's cross our fingers and hope it's syndicated properly. And yes, indeed, it did. It posted the note we wrote and put into the excerpt field and then gave a link back to our website. So we click this link back to our website. It'll open up the permalink just on our web page. So now, through the magic of all the plugins we've activated, installed, and configured, we've been able to relatively easily, in about an hour and a little change here, I don't remember when we started recording, we're able now to post content on our own website, automatically syndicate it to Twitter on our behalf, or delegate it and authenticate to something that'll post to Twitter on our behalf, receive data back from Twitter or back through Twitter to show where that thing was posted on Twitter. And so there's now a post on our site that mirrors almost exactly our post on Twitter in a bidirectional way. But let's go one step further. Let's log into another website, stream.bafosacco.com. Let's see if I can remember my login. That's always a good one to remember. So I have another third-party website, at stream.bafosacco.com. This website is not a WordPress based website. It's running the with known CMS, which is an entirely different set of code and a different setup. You can see it looks different. But let's have a little fun. Let's take this post we just put on Twitter and let's respond to it. So I'm going to take the permalink from this Twitter post and I'm going to use my known account with another website, another domain, another content management system, and I'm going to reply to this tweet. So let's see what happens. I'm going to put the permalink for the tweet in here. I'm going to reply to it, and you'll notice that automatically using that permalink, it automatically fills in the @mention on Twitter. This is a test reply. I'm going to choose within my known interface to syndicate this to Twitter through my other personal account. And let's reply directly to this particular post. So here's the permalink for the post on the website. So we're going to do two things. I'm going to use my known website to reply to both the tweet and the original. So I'm going to post a reply to the original post on IndieWebPress.com, and I'm going to reply also to the copy on Twitter at the same time. So I'm going to do both of those. Here's my reply. These are the two things I'm replying to, and I'm going to syndicate this to Twitter. So I'm going to click publish. We'll let it think for a second, and it should come back and show us. Here is the permalink on my stream known account. It says I replied to a post on Twitter, and I replied to a post, the original and the copy on Twitter, and this is where it is. It also exists on Twitter. So let's look at this Twitter link. We'll open that up, and we'll see that, man, this is complicated. We've come for an awful lot of full circle. So here is the copy on Twitter, the original on Twitter, and here is a reply. So I used a known account to syndicate a reply to Twitter to another original and its copy on Twitter. And there it lives. But let's go back and see what the original looks like. Let's hit refresh on the original. Dun, 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 dun. It's probably stuck in the content management queue. So let's go look at comments. So here we go. So we go to our comments, and sure enough, it's been flagged as possible spam, so it didn't go through, or we haven't set up our settings on our main site to allow comments through, so it's been moderated. So I'm going to click approve, and then let's actually go and look at the post now. So here's the original post we put on our website, and here is a reply that came through from another account, another entirely different website somewhere else. So here's the reply that we put on from another separate account on another CMS that's come through on our WordPress site. So we've used one website to reply to another website. And so there's communication from one website to another, but we've also got that same conversation mirrored on Twitter. So our WordPress setup here is taking the reply from the known CMS on another website, and it's giving us the permalink of where that thing lives. So if we click on it, it'll open it up and show us, here's where it lives on the other site. Here's the copy of it. So we can go back. But it also shows that it was syndicated to Twitter as well. So there's the conversation mirrored on Twitter. So let's go back a second. So we have two separate syndication links of, here's the original on this website, and here's the syndicated copy where it lives on Twitter right here. But down here in the comments section, there's also the reply as it exists on the other website, as well as it intuits and knows where to find the data of where that thing was syndicated to from the known site. And it shows us where that was syndicated as well. So we've got a conversation going on from a WordPress website to a known website and back and forth. In fact, actually, let's see what happens when we reply. I can't believe this. So, and we'll post that comment. And as I do this, I've wondered, did we configure everything we needed to? But I think we have. So let's see what happens. So here's the original post up here. Here's a reply we put using a known website. Here's the comment we just posted a second ago. Let's go see if this known site received that reply. And holy Moses, there it is. So we replied back at this. You see, it amazes me even. We replied back natively in the reply box to a reply, and almost instantaneously, using the web mention protocol, our WordPress site has taken our comment, used web mention to ping a totally different content management system on a totally different domain name and send that reply. That site sees it, accepts it, validates it, and immediately displays it. So now you can not only own your content, post it on your own site, but you can send replies back and forth across not only domains, but even different content management systems. It's almost like magic. This really is how the web should have worked from day one. And somehow we took a left turn in 2007 and allowed Twitter and Facebook to subsume and take over this functionality on our behalf. But here in an hour and a half, we've been able to set this stuff up, get it running, get it going. Bam, there it is. So I think I'm going to wrap this up here as just a quick setup, proof of concept of setting up and IndieWebifying a base WordPress install, which is what I started with. And literally I didn't set anything up other than, I think, a username before we started this little screencast. So I literally started with a base WordPress install with literally no configuration. And I added on, let's go back and do a quick review of what we've added. We'll go back to our dashboard. We added to a base WordPress install, and literally I didn't add anything other than a username and an email address just to have a username, and that was part of the basic WordPress install. But we added the IndieWeb plugin, we activated, we installed and activated the web mention plugin, the semantic linkbacks plugin, and essentially that semantic linkbacks plugin allows the comments to look pretty so that you get the reply here and the photo and details on properly. At least that's what that's doing. where do we go? We activated the MicroPub plugin, but we haven't actually used that. Maybe in the next session we'll set up an Instagram account and show you how MicroPub works. We installed and activated postkinds. We did some minor configuration, created a few posts using it, and gave you some pointers to where to find some more information. We installed and activated syndication links. We configured maybe, what was it, 3 simple options that mostly dealt with, do we want to show an icon text or an icon and text? And we were able to customize how that syndication thing's set up. And in our case, we use the word syndicated to as the option. We set up Bridgie for WordPress, which was the Bridgie plugin, and we installed, activated that, and then we're able to use the IndieAuth plugin to authenticate to the Bridgie service and the Twitter service and authenticate those two so that our Bridgie account could talk to Twitter and vice versa, and so that our WordPress account could talk to Bridgie. So there's a three-leg conversation happening there. And essentially what Bridgie is doing is Bridgie is bootstrapping Twitter's APIs to force Twitter to send web mentions on our behalf. That way, when someone responds to Twitter, Bridgie will see that response and send a web mention to our website with the data of that comment or that like or whatever that thing was back to our website. In fact, actually, let's be cheap and let's click like on that post. And we'll go to our Bridgie account and we'll quickly click on the poll button. We'll let it refresh for a minute and we'll come back to it as we talk. But we set up Bridgie and a Bridgie account so that we can have three-way communication between our website, Bridgie, acting on our behalf to force Twitter to send web mentions back and forth so that we can get Twitter comments back and forth. And we did a little bit of discussion on the simple location plugin, but didn't really fully configure that. And in our case, we skipped the microformats 2 thing. But what this has allowed us to do is create a posts on our website, syndicate a copy of that post to Twitter, and then somebody with another website was able to comment on that post, both on their site and with their Twitter account, and that comment came back to our personal domain as a comment on that post. Literally doing a full circle route to show website to website communication and commenting in a very IndieWeb style. I've been doing this for 3 years, and even walking through it just still utterly astounds me that not only was this not capable or feasible for the last 2 decades or decade and a half, but it's literally with a simple WordPress setup in under an hour and a half, you can enable some really much more powerful ownership of data. So now in this case, actually, what's additionally fun is if Twitter goes down tomorrow, that tweet disappears, but I still own the original on my website, IndieWebPress.com, or the ability to own it. If I want to unpublish it, I can. That's great too. But I own it on my website, and I also will still own a link to where it went to on Twitter, but all the conversation that occurred around and relating to Twitter also lives on my website. So now let's go back to our comment section and go and look what's happened. We've gotten we've gotten two more things. We've gotten a comment that our IndieWebPress account, when I clicked like here, that like was picked up by the Bridgie service and sent as a web mention to our account, which now shows up here as a like on our site. So I'll click approve and we'll see what that looks like again. And then here is the test reply. So when we syndicated from known, we syndicated a copy of our reply there to Twitter. So that reply went to Twitter, and Bridgie picked that reply up on Twitter as well. So this is kind of a duplicate, and if we want to approve it, we can. But typically I wouldn't, because it's just a duplicate of something we've already received a mention of. But let's go back to our post and pull it up. Here's the original post. There's now 4 thoughts on this. There's the reply from known with the syndicated copy from Twitter there. There's our reply back to that, but then here's the test reply that came back via Twitter. So here's where it came from on Twitter, the test reply here on Twitter, the native one. And then down here we have likes, which we've set up as a default. It face piles likes. So if 15 more people came along and clicked the like button on our Twitter post, we would get all those likes would show up here at the bottom of the post. You know, just stunning stuff. So with that, after an hour and change, I'm going to leave you there. Hopefully this has been at least relatively followable. I'll try and post some additional contents and comments that, you know, additionally describe or diagram, I guess, is probably the best thing if we have some diagrams of showing what's going on here. But if you're trying to IndieWebify your own WordPress setup, this is a very quick, simple, dirty thing. Hopefully folks can deal with and follow along. And hopefully we'll come back and add to it. There's many different ways, obviously, to do this. This was a quick and easy way to do it now. Maybe we'll show some other options and variations on themes for doing this. But in the erstwhile, you can set up, hopefully based on this, your maybe Twitter and Instagram and Google Plus accounts to work with Bridgie so that you can syndicate out to Facebook, syndicate out to other sites and get those responses back using Bridgie, using roughly these same methods that we showed here on Twitter and following the same steps. If you have questions, problems, feel free to add replies here or on the original post on my website at bafosacco.com. You can find lots of help in the IndieWeb.com chat, which you can find through the IndieWeb wiki at https://indieweb.org. And with that, this is Chris Aldrich of bafosacco.com, leaving you for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll hopefully see you with future tutorials in the near future. Thanks.